2:37 a.m. My bright digital clock read, burning into my eyes after tapping the brightness button, effectively undoing any progress of sleep I had managed to make over what felt like endless tossing and turning. I found myself going into quick 10-minute periods of sleep before waking back up for what felt like at least an hour. I tried not to think about anything, or use my brain, or anything else that would awaken me further. My sheets, which had once been perfectly layered, had now been strewn and rolled beyond any good to cover me. Giving up, and deciding that I'll sleep when I get tired on my own, I began to stare across my darkened room, trying to make out the objects on my desk. My room wasn't dark enough to the point where you couldn't see clearly across it, but it was dark enough to where you would need to take a few extra glances to tell what you were looking at. I did this for about 2 minutes, when I heard a sound. It sounded like when someone is scraping or brushing the wall in an opposite room. I turned my head to my bedroom door, where I thought I heard the sound. The sound persisted, small but undeniable brushing sounds, sounding in short second intervals down the hallway leading to my bedroom. The sounds were coming closer. I assumed that it was just my cat, Oliver, wandering the house at night as he usually did. I was still new to the concept of having an animal in the house. I would often find him hiding in my room somewhere waiting for me to come in and shut the door to go to sleep, only to be woken up in the dead of night to see him sitting on the foot of my bed watching me. I knew for a fact he wasn't in my room this night. I had checked the room before I turned out the lights for his usual hiding places. I could hear the brushing growing slightly louder, to the point I could distinct the height of the sound. If it truly was my cat, the scraping and brushing should have been coming from the floor level. The sounds I heard were coming from at least 4 to 5 feet above the ground. The floorboards on the outside of my room creaked, signaling that something was now right outside the door. Then silence. I was honestly beginning to become slightly unnerved, but I didn't want to assume the worst to psych myself out even more. I sorta just wanted to open the door to prove that it was just Oliver, and that he had just sat down in front of my door. Or maybe it was one of my siblings or parents that got out of bed for some water and were just feeling around for the walls to make sure they didn't bump into anything. I began to move the small amount of covers off myself and put my feet over my bed and touch the ground. The floorboards creaked again, causing me not to move further. Something was running away. It didn't sound like heavy running, but it didn't sound like a cat running either. The best I can describe it is it sounded like a toddler's running. Assuming a toddler could run full sprint directly away from my door, make a few quick turns, then sprint all the way back down the stairs. My youngest sibling was 15 years old, so they would have definitely made more noise than that. I got up the next morning to take the trash out, since the garbage truck would be coming the following day. However, something caught my eye as I glanced at the backyard. Something red. I unlatched the gate and walked into a massacre. The garden was fine, but strewn across the entirety of the yard were animals. Dead animals, torn apart in the most grisly manners imaginable. Their stomachs and intestines were littering the yard. I don't believe there was so much as one animal that wasn't entirely disemboweled. Alongside them were some animals whose only remains were shattered and bloodied bones and mangled fur, which stuck to my shoes from the blood-soaked soil. What shook me up more were the types of animals that were laying across the yard. We would occasionally get dead squirrels or chipmunks that would either be half-eaten in the yard by some local predator, but amongst the mangled animals were several birds and what appeared to be large crows. I even found the remains of a few alley cats. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I didn't want to. How could this have even happened, and what could have even done this? Our backyard was no different from any of our neighbors, size-wise, and it was entirely fenced off. Something would have had to kill all these animals, hop the fence, and then eat them in our yard. My dad spent the next 20 minutes with gloves on, putting the animal parts into a large trash bag, while I used a hose to wash away all the blood before any of my brothers or mom woke up. My dad made me promise not to tell my mom or my younger brothers about what had happened, as it would only cause them to be scared. Like I wasn't scared of this either. Today was Friday, so I would be able to stay up late tonight as I wouldn't have to get up for my summer job in the morning. I decided to spend the night working on a few songs for my SoundCloud, super late into the night. I had planned to keep going all night till 3 in the morning, as that would be a new record for me staying up late. My fan was going, but that didn't stop me from still getting hot from my computer monitor. I suppressed the urge to remain in my chair and got up and left my room to go downstairs and get some water to take back. I passed by the clock in the hallway. It was 2:26. Time would go by once I got back into editing mode, so it wouldn't be a bother. I reached the kitchen sink and started pouring myself a glass of water, trying to make as little noise as possible as to not wake my family. As the faucet ran, I looked out the window just above the sink, which faced our backyard. Just before the thoughts of last morning poured back into my mind, I heard something from one of the other rooms. I shut off the faucet quickly and placed the cup onto the counter to see if I would hear the sound again. Tapping. Light tapping that you would hear if someone were tapping a wooden table with just the tips of their fingernails. I turned back to get my water off the counter before turning back and peering into the darkened house. The first thing I saw were its eyes, unrealistically large and bright eyes cutting through the darkness to look straight at me. It stood on all fours, if you could even call them limbs. They resembled more like toothpicks than strong arms and legs. Its height almost reached the ceiling, and its mouth stretched a good foot away from its head, as though it were some dog. Looking through the darkness in horror, the animal had the same fur as my cat Oliver, albeit mangy and unkempt. I was standing maybe 7 feet from the stairs. The creature was standing probably twice that distance. Not that I was planning to do anything in particular anyway. My joints were beginning to lock up with fear. But as soon as I looked towards the stairs, the creature began to move its long, gangly limbs forward towards me. That was all I needed to see in order to bolt up the stairs, not even noticing at the time that I had dropped my water on the floor to run faster. The pitter-pattering of its awful limbs were behind me all the way, accompanied by a horrible hissing sound. I slammed my foot into the wall. I even accidentally scraped my arm across the wall in my blind panic to get back to my room and lock the door. It didn't scratch or claw the door or pound itself against it. The creaking of the floorboards told me it was right outside the door, just waiting. I was in a cold sweat, thinking about any possible way to escape my room. I was on the second floor, and beneath my 2 bedroom windows were metal cellar doors and rose patches. Even if I had jumped out, it would just come outside while I was recovering from the fall. For the next few hours, I heard horrible tearing and crunching sounds, accompanied by screaming coming from the nearby rooms. I knew exactly what that thing was doing. I tried to cover my ears with my pillows, but I would instead be more focused on the horrible stench of death that was now permeating my house. I have been living this way for 2 weeks. I have just drank the last water from my fish tank. I have eaten what little food was left in my room, and have resorted to eating leather shoes just to survive. It's waiting right outside the door. I know it is. I hear its hissing every sleepless night, mocking me by clawing at my door. I'd scream out my windows, but it would scratch harder at my plywood door, threatening to snap it open. It would do the same if I slept too long. My door is getting weaker by the hour. I may just let it in, if only to end my pain and suffering.